Good morning, Smogon. Hope you are all doing well today. I know I am. My name is MANNAT, and I am here to bring you guys another SPL match commentary. Here we have Santu versus Lighthouses, two solid players this SPL. And looking at these two teams, we have a bit of an interesting bulky team from Santu using a couple of noteworthy technologies. And on the other hand, we have Lighthouses using what looks to be a pretty straightforward Excadrill Zapdos bulky offense. We see this archetype pretty often, but he takes an interesting spin on it with the Metagross and the Keldeo. Let's start things off. Santu leads off with Scizor. On a bulky team like this is typically going to be a defog set. Lighthouses instantly doubles out to Keldeo on the Blissey. Now, one thing you guys may be wondering is why is Santu using Blissey over an Eviolite Chansey? The brief explanation is the combination of leftovers protect, being able to protect it from pursuits from things like a Choice Band Weavile or Tyranitar, etc., as well as the ability of leftovers plus protect to kind of buffer it against hazards. On the other hand, a Chansey can get worn down very quickly with a combination of Stealth Rock and double switches into threats that force it out, as it's taken 12.5 every single time and doesn't really have any option. Whereas on the other hand, Blissey is getting a little bit of healing every turn from leftovers, gets extra healing from protect, so it has a bit more sustain against entry hazards. That's the short and sweet of why Blissey is good. Here, Blissey is going to protect against what Santu believed to be a Choice Band Weavile, and Lighthouses uses Swords Dance. This is a really cool team building choice from Lighthouses, as these teams typically do use Choice Band Weavile, Rapid Spin Excadrill, 3 attacks, Zapdos, Scarf Volcanion, but playing on Santu being a knowledgeable player and knowing what these teams typically look like, Lighthouses opts for Swords Dance Weavile to catch Santu off guard, and it pays dividends here with the Swords Dance. Now, Lighthouses is going to use Knockoff on the switch to Scizor and reveals Taunt on the attempted Roost. That's definitely big. And that's going to keep Scizor at 55%. Scizor is typically going to be running Defog on these teams, so keeping Santu's methods of removing hazards low is definitely a good choice that Lighthouses will hopefully be reaping the benefits of throughout this game. Now, the Weavile is obviously going to switch out here on the Santu doubling out to Weavile, predicting the Zapdos. And Lighthouses does just stay in, predicting the Weavile presumably to knock off on like a switch to Keldeo or Volcanion or what have you, and just going for Heat Wave, as Santu luckily avoids the burn from Heat Wave on that switch to Gliscor. Santu is just going to stay in and click Stealth Rock, as Lighthouses uses Volt Switch, predicting Santu to go into something like a Blissey to scout HP Ice. And now, this is really tough for Lighthouses, as is very obvious. This team has 3 team members that are weak to Stealth Rock, so Rocks being up does limit and constrict Lighthouses plays quite a bit, and the Gliscor is basically at full, completely unpunished for getting up Stealth Rock as well. A big thing in Gen 6 OU is that since your entry hazard removal options aren't as robust as other gens, you don't have a Defog Tornadus like you do in Gen 7, Gen 8. You don't have Defog Static Zapdos, and a lot of these offensive teams are going to want Static. You don't have heavy duty boots to have a little bit of, buffer against entry hazards. So it's very important to punish the turn that the enemy sets up Stealth Rock in order to maintain your momentum and create a trade-off. So anytime someone can get up Stealth Rock for free on an offensive team like this, it has a big impact on the game. We see HP Ice come out from Zapdos. to chip away at Santu's, and we see a Volt Switch come out. An important thing to note is that this Zapdos has pressure, which does indicate defog, as like I mentioned earlier, static is illegal with defog, and that makes sense since it's a bulky team, and offensive teams can sort of operate with Stealth Rock up and just try and win the game first, whereas these bulkier teams really need it off to make the most of their big threats. And we see Keldeo come in here on the Zapdos. Keldeo is going to probably just... Ooh, we see a Hidden Power Grass. I assumed it would Scald to try and fish for a burn on the Slowbro, but instead Lighthouses does just opt to go directly for the HP Grass on the switch to Slowbro. That's going to do a lot. I assume this is Hidden Power Grass just because of like stuff like Gastrodon, and the fact that there is a Weavile that doesn't have Pursuit means there's some possibility that something like an HP goes, but Grass tends to have better coverage overall. It also hits Rotom without needing to rely on something like Focus Blast to do a ton of damage to physically defensive Rotom. We do see a Taunt come out, trying to stop the Slowbro from using something like a Thunder Wave or Toxic or Slack Off even. As Blissey comes in, that it is absolutely going to have nothing to do with the Keldeo beyond just using Seismic Toss, which is not really going to bring you much progress. So Lighthouses did have a pretty free Hidden Power Grass. Just uses it again here, predicting the Slowbro to just attack, and Psyshock is going to do a lot of damage to the Keldeo here. And Lighthouses makes a great play there, surfing. Now with the Slowbro so low, and its ability to soft check Keldeo, help out against Volcanion, so you don't have to risk the Blissey as much. With Scizor at 55, you may want to use it against the Metagross as well. Santu is always going to have to save the Slowbro, and Lighthouses smartly predicted a switch. Obviously, there could have been a pivot through Blissey or through Gliscor, but Lighthouses does identify that Gliscor was going to be the one coming in. Weavile now comes in on the Keldeo, and Lighthouses switches out and basically sacrifices the Volcanion, which does reveal Assault Vest, meaning that this team is quite slow. That does make me think it kind of has to be Bullet Punch Metagross, as you really, even though you have a Keldeo, this team is still kind of weak to Weavile, because Keldeo is not going to be a permanent answer. And if Stealth Rock does go up, it is a huge threat. And so Volcanion is going to just get sacrificed to Weavile. I think that's the right sack, with Blissey basically being able to permanently wall it and a Slowbro in the back. It's not going to do much. And Lighthouses is going to use this opportunity to spin away the Stealth Rock permanently, now that the Gliscor is fainted. The Excadrill is not going to want to stay in and take a Heat Wave here, and Lighthouses realizes that Santu is either going to Roost, in which case the Weavile comes in for free, or attack, and in either case the Weavile is going to be exerting some offensive pressure on the team. This feels like a pretty free opportunity to knock off here for Lighthouses, but he does just opt to go for Icicle Crash, predicting the Zapdos to stay in. Santu does go into Weavile here. This is going to be Choice Band, and knockoff does a ton to Metagross. We see Lighthouses just stay in and attack, likely predicting the Weavile to switch out to something like Scizor or Slowbro or Zapdos. But Santu opts to just stay in and takes out the Metagross. Big kill for Santu there, as Metagross would have been a pretty big threat. There's a decent chance it was the Stealth Rock user on this team, though it can still be Excadrill. And I can understand where that play came from, and it's also possible the Metagross just doesn't have Bullet Punch on this team, which is something to note. Excadrill does come into Weavile, and Santu does go into Zapdos to make sure that if this is a Stealth Rock Excadrill, he will be able to defog it away. Discharges on Lighthouse's switch to his own Zapdos, and is probably going to get that free defog here on the Roost. Discharge is used on Zapdos on these bulkier teams, as sometimes having Volt Switch as your only electric move can be a little bit problematic on a bulky team where you don't really have a big threat to receive your like Volt Switch momentum. Though this team does have that Choice Band Weavile, This has been kind of a trend throughout history in competitive Pokemon where people will use an offensive pursuit trapper like a Weavile or a Tyranitar on a bulky team. And at first glance, it might look like a bit of like a pace mismatch. You've got this big offensive threat with all these bulky Pokemon, but it is quite useful as pursuit with the absence of trappers like Dugtrio and Gothitelle is one of your best ways to trap key offensive threats to your team. And being able to force situations where pursuit is going to guarantee a kill on a threat can eliminate something that would otherwise be able to stick around indefinitely against your team because of your lack of offensive pressure. We do see the Roost from Santu to keep his Zapdos healthy on the Volt Switch into Weavile. Lighthouses once again has kind of a free attack here. And we are going to see a Swords Dance come out. I have to say that doesn't feel like a great play from Lighthouses, as it forces him into sort of a more awkward 50-50 than he would have needed against this Scizor. I think just using Knockoff would have been fine. But now we're in a situation where if you get Bullet Punched on Taunt, well, Bullet Punch is pretty free for the Scizor here, actually, because the Weavile can't really stay in, so you have to switch out into Zapdos. And Santu does go for the Roost there, because that Bullet Punch threat was unguardable for the Weavile. And we do see the Roost come out. Even if Lighthouses got that taunt play right, it still would have been at 55%, and pretty much no progress would have been made. So I think Knockoff would have been a bit of a stronger play, as the payoff for getting that taunt play would have been a bit higher. We do see Zapdos come out from Lighthouses, but now that Scizor is back to full, it's really hard to see Weavile really doing anything else the rest of this game. Keldeo is going to come in on that Blissey, and just click Hidden Power Grass on the Protect. And Secret Swords on the stay-in from the Blissey, as this Blissey is going to Seismic Toss, and the Keldeo does just barely hang on with that 1%, but now it is in range of getting Pursuit Trapped by the Weavile since it's so low. And this kind of shows what I was talking about before with offensive threats, that if the Weavile wasn't there, this Keldeo could kind of stick around indefinitely. But now Santu kind of has the safety net of like, hey, if after something dies to this Keldeo, I can just take it out with Weavile right afterwards, no problem. And Santu is just going to sack the Slowbro. Well, not sack, because it does take out the Keldeo, because it doesn't die to HP Grass, but Santu doesn't really mind losing a ton of Slowbro HP here, because he does have the Heat Wave Zapdos to completely block this Excadrill, as Rapid Spin Stealth Rock is typically going to run Earthquake and Iron Head as the last two moves, so it's not going to have too much to touch Zapdos. You've got the Scizor for Weavile. The Keldeo, like I said, if it gets like a critical hit with Hidden Power Grass or what have you, you're gonna have Weavile to Pursuit Trap it. So Lighthouses is pretty much checkmated at this point in the game. You will see a Volt Switch come out as Lighthouses goes back into Weavile, which is sort of his only way of making anything resembling progress in this game. He does use Knockoff on the switch to Scizor, but it's a little too late. Scizor is too healthy for you to really wear it down, and the I believe it's especially defensive. Nah, that looks physically defensive. Uninvested Volt Switch doing 30. But anyways, what I was saying is like the Zapdos is going to be able to sort of just sit there and tank hits from the Zapdos for now, but with the Blissey being so low, you do have to be a little bit careful of how you approach it. And Lighthouses does smartly go into Excadrill here, because like I mentioned, you don't want to give up free turns as much in Gen 6. And if the Blissey protects as Excadrill goes for Stealth Rock, it's a big punish. And Lighthouses just go directly into Weavile on the Zapdos, predicting that defog, and Santu is forced to switch out into Slowbro here. Well, not forced to, he could have gone Scizor, but he just chooses to sack Slowbro, likely predicting an Icicle Crash and like trying to get some HP back, but Slowbro going down doesn't really matter at this point. And Santu does go for a Pursuit as Lighthouses goes for Icicle Crash. And Santu does smartly switch out the Weavile here, as he does have that Ice Shard in the back to take out this Weavile if needed. And Lighthouses is just going to go for knockoff as Santu clicks superpower here, like we just covering for a potential X schedule switch in the event that Lighthouses decides to do it, as it doesn't really make a difference whether the Scizor has been taken out now that Weavile's down. Just doesn't really need it anymore. Roosts up, and we're going to see Zapdos come in, and while Lighthouses is doing his best to try and exploit this low HP Blissey, you just see like the team is too bulky and you can't quite get through it. And this game is pretty much over at this point. Santu's team is not really able to get broken through by Zapdos alone, and one switch into Blissey on not Volt Switch pretty much heals it to full, and Lighthouse's goose is cooked. With Blissey at full, just nothing you can really do besides hope you can flinch down the Zapdos, and he is not even able to do that. Takes a Heat Wave, says GG, forfeits, as the game is completely over at this point. This was admittedly not the easiest matchup for Lighthouses. His Keldeo was a huge threat, but with Regenerator, Slowbro, Zapdos, Santu did have some options to kind of limit the Keldeo, and taking that Psyshock early meant that it could get chipped down by Blissey a lot easier than it would be able to otherwise. Having the Stealth Rocker be this spin Iron Head X-Digital really bit Lighthouses in the butt here, as he had no way of preventing Zapdos from defogging those Stealth Rock. Something like a Stealth Rock Metagross would have been a lot more potentially dangerous on this construction, as with Scizor low and Zapdos not being able to stand up to repeated Zen Headbutts, especially with pressure, which means there's no threat of static. He maybe could have gotten Stealth Rock up to augment the Keldeo's offense, but you really see the problem with not being able to get hazards up against these bulkier teams in this matchup. Santu played very well and didn't make any mistakes. Like, even though he ended up tossing out the Gliscor, he didn't really need that thing to win the game, and smartly preserved his more valuable resources in that situation. Overall, this is a fairly straightforward game where Santu kind of dominated. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to follow us either here or on Twitch to catch our live coverage of these SPL games on Sunday. The playoffs are coming up, so action will be even more heated than it already was. Hope you guys liked the video if you did, and have a wonderful day.